Welcome, everybody, to Highside, Lowside. Zach and Spurge here with you, as always. On this episode, we are talking to our good buddy Tim, who has, we think, a fascinating story about getting into motorcycling, getting out of motorcycling, and then getting back into motorcycling. We had a blast talking to him, and we think you're going to love it. Also, a call out to Gen Z listeners and thoughts on getting into riding with a skeptical spouse. All of that and more coming up after a word from our sponsor.
Gas prices are a bitch. And that's why you ride a motorcycle, to save money on fuel. But you've noticed that your fuel consumption, your beloved bike, has gotten a little bit lackluster lately. Well, maybe that's because your fueling system is a little dirty. Luckily for you, Motul has you covered with their Motul valve and injector cleaner additive. One bottle will treat up to 60 liters of fuel. You put it in there once every 6 months and it does its thing. So keep your bike in its most efficient form possible to keep money in your wallet. Check out Motul's full line of products, including the Motul valve and injector cleaner, over on RevZilla.com/Motul. That's RevZilla.com/MOTUL. And while you're over there on RevZilla.com, make sure you check out the RPM program. That's the Riders Preferred Membership Program, now only $39.99 a year. You get all kinds of discounts on motorcycle gear and apparel. You get $15 for just signing up, free 2-day shipping, concierge service, and it works across all of RevZilla's sister brands. That means J&P Cycles, Cycle Gear, RevZilla, and Rever. To learn more about all the benefits of the RPM program, head over to RevZilla.com/RPM. That's RevZilla.com/RPM. Now, on with the show.
Okie dokie, everybody. Welcome to Highside, Lowside. Zach and Spurge here on another journey. We're going to bring our buddy Tim in here in a minute. But for now, every now and then, you listeners, I want you to know, Spurge is a big fancy businessman. He's a business guy. We
just had a conversation about this recently because somebody wrote into you and complained like, "Oh, Spurgeon's presenting himself a little bit too."
No. I'm not. You're not being hoity-toity. I'm just saying Spurge is a businessman and he does business things sometimes, and he wants you to know about it. And this is a perfect example of Spurge paying attention to the business and is going to share some business with us. And I think this is great.
I prefer to think about this as we've oftentimes on Highside, Lowside challenged each other, challenged our listeners to think about how to get new people into riding. And yes. I think it's oftentimes easy to think about new riders as, young riders, right? And I think that's going to be a topic of what we're going to talk about today is kind of branching out how we look at this. But one of the studies that was done recently by a colleague that presented at AIM, which is the AIM Expo in Southern California, which is kind of like a motorcycle industry conference.
Exposition,
if you will, was around Gen Z and how to create interest in motorcycling for Gen Z.
Yes.
And they went through some pretty interesting data. One of the points that I found interesting was if you look at the baby boomer generation, there was a high priority placed on asset acquisition. And for some of us that are about to inherit the possession of baby boomers down the road, not all of us want the assets that are left behind, right? And so with Gen Z, because they want a low liability of this burden of possessions, well, they might not want 4 or 5 motorcycles in the garage, right? They might want an option to rent motorcycles. And through this study, it kind of was interesting to look at, how the world perceives Generation Z. And that's one data point. But what we thought would be fun would be to actually talk to some people in Gen Z. Does that sound about right, Zach?
Yeah, well, we actually are too old as millennials to know whether or not Gen Zers even talk to each other. Like, do you use voice boxes? They might just like text or Snapchat or some other TikTok. I don't know. The point is, if there are any Gen Z people out there that want to be on the radio, just like their grandpappy done did. It's sort of this is a call to action, right, Spurge? That's the ultimate goal here. It's like to talk to some Gen Z riders or wannabe riders to learn what it is about our pastime, our hobby, that is either attractive, scary, all those things.
And the business side aside,
See, here he
I
goes.
think what Zach and Chase and I were interested in as we started, going through this is having genuine conversations with people across demographic lines to take it beyond the spreadsheets, right? We talk about oftentimes when you're looking at a motorcycle, you can't look at a spec sheet and really fully understand it. You have to get on and go
doesn't
ride.
tell the whole story.
And so for us, instead of looking at this presentation and saying, oh, well, Gen Z doesn't want things, so I guess, motorcycling is dead because they're never going to buy one. We figured, let's talk to some people that are riding a motorcycle that are in their late teens and early to mid 20s. And so if you are out there and you are a Highside, Lowside listener and you are in Generation Z, and you either ride a motorcycle or you're listening to this podcast because you are interested in riding a motorcycle, any type of two wheels, scooters, e-bikes, whatever you're riding that's bringing you into our fold, we would like to hear from you. So please.
What's the, give them a rundown. What's age for Gen Z again? We're talking, what is it? 17 to 27, something like that? What is it?
I believe it's like 16 to 27.
16 to 27? Sure.
16,
something like
16
that.
or 17 to 27. If you're of driving age up to, or even before driving age, if you're in that late teens, mid to late teens up to, mid to early 20 or mid to late 20s, we want to hear from you.
And if people with gray hair often refer to you as quote unquote young, you might be the person we're looking for.
So shoot us an email and just give us some thoughts over at Highside, Lowside at RevZilla.com. And if you're interested, we might have an opportunity for you to come on and talk to Zach and I as we kind of spend some time over the next, seasons, doing some of these human interest stories to hopefully inspire other people your own age,
right,
to get into motorcycling, which is kind of what we're doing here today, right, Zach?
Lovely segue, Spurjo, to our guest today, who is not in Gen Z, but rather, well, I actually don't know what generation. We'll have to maybe you can tell us what generation he's in. He's either a young baby boomer or an elder Gen Xer.
Based on his spirit, I classified him as an elder Gen Xer.
Okay,
well, let's see what he says.
Our buddy Tim's on the pod today here, everybody. And we're gonna dive right into it and get to know him and his motorcycling experience because we think there's a lot to sort of learn and unpack and entertain everyone here today. So our buddy Tim Harris here. He is in his early 60s currently. He works as the president of the Los Angeles Lakers organization in Los Angeles, California. So a big fancy corporate job, in other words. He lives in greater LA with his wife. He has 3 sons, ranging in age from 14 to 21. And Tim's motorcycling story is mostly what we're going to talk about. He rode motorcycles from about age 16 to age 22. When he was a teenager, and how he got into motorcycling, we think is kind of cool. Then 3-4 decades went by and he decided to get back into motorcycling around the age of 60. And when he did that, his whole experience there, we think, is kind of interesting and noteworthy and educational for you all, we hope. And ultimately, Tim sent an email to RevZilla, and that turned into him texting with you and I all the time, Spurge. But none of that is really why Tim is on the podcast.
It's funny. Tim texts us so much that I was coming in to record today, and my wife Nicole was like, "Tell Tim that I said hi." I haven't heard from him in a while. But no, the reason that we're having Tim on today is very much in line with the conversation earlier around Gen Z. We had done a survey recently through RevZilla, and we learned that roughly 30% of new riders are between the ages of late 30s to early 60s. So, elder millennials to younger baby boomers. And so for us, it was interesting to look at this demographic where we often think about, a new rider is a young person, right?
Right.
And in this particular case, almost a third of new riders are coming into motorcycling later in life. And so we thought it would be fun to sit down with Tim, hear his story, and, kind of get an idea of what brought him back into motorcycling in an effort to hopefully inspire some of the people that are listening right now that might be on the fringe. We also know that in that same survey, 25% of people that don't yet ride a motorcycle but are interested in it are of the same age range. So maybe of that small group or that quarter of the group, Tim's story will help to push one or two of you over the edge into getting into two wheels. So without any further ado, Tim Harris, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, guys. How we doing?
All right.
It's great to see you.
Yes. Well, so we just gave the whole spiel on you, your history, your life story very briefly. We're going to dive into that.
Yep.
When I was listening to Spurge talk there, he's talking about how 50, 60-year-old people are getting into motorcycling. I think it's interesting that you were both a young person who got into motorcycling and an older person who got into motorcycling. You have both of those stories, which is one of the reasons we wanted to have you on the pod and talk to you today. I think, if it's okay with you, Spurge, we'll start at the beginning, because I think the way that you got into bikes was kind of cool, Tim. So you are 15, 16 years old, living, born and raised in greater Los Angeles. Why did you get a motorcycle to begin with?
So when I was 15, I was living in suburbia, right? And I had a buddy whose father had two motorcycles. He had a little Honda 90, which was probably a late 60s Honda 90. And he had a bigger, and it seemed a lot bigger then, but a bigger, I think it was a Triumph 250 Trailmaster or something like that.
Okay.
It was probably, the Triumph was probably either the precursor or the early Scrambler, right? Because it had that sort of high, that high pipe.
Yeah.
So the dad kind of taught us how to ride the 90 at first. And at first it was, hey, you can go down the street and back and down the street and back. And then, okay, you can go around the block. And we're 15. We have no license. We have this is the extent of our training.
Did you ask your parents for permission?
That was my question too.
You know what? I think I just sort of one day later on when I got better and I had sort of borrowed the little Honda, and I think I just turned up at the house.
Showed up at home.
Yeah, yeah, because he lived down the street. He lived like not maybe a couple blocks away, and eventually, and I don't. You guys would know better, like a late 60s Honda 90. I don't recall a clutch. I don't remember.
It was probably basically a Trail 90, like the one that Ari rode across Alaska.
Yeah, it was very simple. And so I remember, my dad had volunteered me to do yard work for one of his coworkers. And this man's wife was a tyrant. And I remember it was easy. It was an easy bike ride away, but I would ride the little 90 over to the tyrant's house and clean tree leaves out of her ivy. But then over time we learned how to ride the Triumph, which had a clutch, a lot heavier, bigger bike.
Right.
And what that allowed us to do is ride together around the neighborhood. Okay. As we were 15. So now, like any 16-year-old, I'm progressing, or 15-year-old, I'm progressing towards 16, and I've got my learner's permit for driving. And I must have been around the house, and I'm talking about how excited I am for my 16th birthday, so I can go down to the DMV and get my driver's license and freedom and drive a car. Right. And my dad stops me in my tracks and says, I'm sorry, do you see more than two cars parked at our house? There's, your mom has one and I have one. Do you see a third? No, Dad, there's not a third. Okay, can you take me out into the backyard and show me where the money tree is, where we're going to go and buy you a car when we didn't buy your older brother a car, and my older brother was 18 months older than me or something. And so that stopped me. Right. I'd had this thought that I was going to have all kinds of freedom. I was getting my driver's license. I was going to drive some sort of four-wheel machine.
Right.
So I thought, okay, well, there's a workaround here. I'll get a motorcycle license. Okay. That'll be my thing, because at the time you could get a motorcycle license. You just needed to go down and take the test. So my buddy and I borrowed the 90, and with no license, I drove down in the pouring rain, took the driving test, passed it, took the written while you're there, passed it. So now I have a license. Okay, now I'm good to go. Now I actually need a motorcycle. So I found out that there was a sandwich shop that was hiring 3 miles away or so. And I went down and applied to work at the sandwich shop, got hired. And I came home that night and I said, hey, folks, I got hired at the Giant Grinder to work in the sailor shop. And my dad again stops me in my tracks and says, well, that's tremendous. How are you getting there? And I said, well, Dad, I've kind of thought this through because I had been researching through the newspaper, right? I'm looking through want ads, and the little tiny want ads. I saw that there was a Honda 250 Enduro XL that was for sale for $500. And
so you had a plan. Like when you got the job, you had a plan.
Yeah,
okay.
100%.
The low financial barrier, to be clear, was kind of, that was the driver here. You're kind of like, I like piddling around the neighborhood on the neighbor's moto. And like, I know that if I want this quote unquote freedom by being 16, the way to do that is to get a bike because it'll be cheaper. So then you started like working toward this without necessarily looping your parents all the way in.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct. I thought this was going to be the workaround because I'm never going to be able to afford a car because I didn't have, two nickels to rub together. I had nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, well, Dad, I've got a solution. If you will loan me $500, I can go and buy this motorcycle, which will allow me to drive to the Giant Grinder to work and get paid on the motorcycle. So I've got some freedom and I can pay you back the $500. I need to borrow $500. He says, that sounds like a really good plan. So on the day I had made arrangements to pick up the motorcycle, I needed a check. This is late 70s, right? So I have an actual check.
Yeah.
And I went to my dad and I said, Dad, I'm going to go pick up the motorcycle today. I need a check to pay for the motorcycle. It's $500 and it's made payable to John Q. Public, whoever it was. He writes me the check and he's going to hand me the check and he says, okay, now you owe me $550. And I said, but wait a minute, Dad, I'm borrowing $500. Why would I owe you $550? And he says, well, that's the price of my money. My money is my $500 costs you $50. That's how the world works. If you can get $500 for cheaper than my $50, you should go and do it. Okay, well, obviously I can't get that. So I took the money, bought the bike, brought the bike home. And that night my dad got home and said, I said, Dad, look at this bike. He said, that's a really beautiful bike, son. Did you get a pink slip with that bike? I said, I did. He says, let me see that pink slip. Right. And my dad, he had just gotten home. He worked in aerospace. So he's got his tie in his pocket, square, and his dress shirt. And he takes the pink slip and he looks at it and he folds it up and puts it in his pocket. And I said, what are you doing? And he says, you don't own a motorcycle. I own a motorcycle. And if you miss one payment on my motorcycle, I am selling my motorcycle. And at the time, I thought it was the meanest thing in the world.
Right.
But looking back, it was the greatest lesson in finance I could have ever got. And it was,
Plus,
and it was
with the way interest rates were in the late 70s, your dad gave you a heck of a deal. Yeah.
Yeah. It was 10%. Well, and the great, Spurge, I was thinking about it is, this, so now I've got this bike that I've got all kinds of freedom. And like, you guys know me, I can't wrench I cannot wrench at all. Like I am literally, if Ari is at one end of the wrenching spectrum, I'm balancing him at the other end, right? I can't wrench at all. So I have this bike. I do no care for it. I honestly can't remember if I ever cleaned the chain, oiled the chain. I don't know if I ever changed the oil. I own this thing for 5-6 years. Yes. Right. I rode the hell out of it. And so I had this bike, but I was thinking about this the other day, guys, is I had it during the energy crisis. And this is like
when there were like lines at gas stations.
When there were lines at gas stations.
Okay.
So you had your license plate had a number on it, and depending upon if your last number of your license plate determined when you would go get license, when you would go get gas. So odd numbers on this day, even numbers on that day, and you would. Like what is a Honda 250 gas take? 2 gallons, like 2.5 gallons. It was tiny. And so I'd have to, I remember sitting in line and there's no phones. You have no phone. You have nothing to occupy your time. And I remember sort of standing in line where, you'd move up a car length at a time for an hour and a half to get 75 cents worth of gas.
Dang.
Right.
Cow.
But it was, that was,
and then you'd have to go back 2 days later. Cause like you're already going. Yeah.
It's like the thing had no range on it.
Well, I freaking love that story because I think it's such an interesting, it's rare. I think that people get into motorcycling in this country, that is, in the United States, for sort of like practical or like financial reasons, right? Like you had a plan here. You're like, I'm going to work at the sandwich shop. I'm going to get to the sandwich shop. I'm going to get cheap transportation. It wasn't about sort of like, oh, well, I mean, I guess it started with your buddy's friend who let you ride the Trail 90 around and you thought it was fun. And that's, you know, part of the, we'll get into that more later. But I think it's kind of rare that people make this like, I don't know, this decision that theoretically makes sense on paper. Like I'm going to do this thing and it makes sense financially. So I think that what I'm interested in now is kind of, what did that freedom look like? So you had this imagined freedom. I'm turning 16. I'm going to get my license. I'm going to get a vehicle. I'm going to have a job. I'm going to be able to go places. How did that manifest? Like, is that what happened? Did you use it only as transportation to get to the sandwich shop, or did it turn into more than that? Did you ride it with your friends?
Women are going to want you. Men are going to want to be you.
Steve McQueen. Yeah.
So gosh, there's so much to that, Zach, is it became obviously my way to school, right? So school was, however far school was, a couple miles away. So it became a way, not just to the sandwich shop, it became a way to school. I grew up in a beach town. So it was every single solitary day you took the long way home to ride by the beach. Every day without fail, you took the long way so you could ride along and look at the waves, right? I mean, that's just what you did. And there was a loop that I created that on the weekends I might take it out and go up for a loop that was up in the hills. Then I would go on a loop, but I did not ride. I absolutely did ride at night. Absolutely did ride in the rain, but I absolutely did not ride on the freeway. And I think in part because where we lived was sort of tucked away and it was a little bit far from the freeway and I really had no reason to get on the freeway.
Right.
But that's the only reason and I rode the freeway one time. I went to UCLA and one time I had to ride on the 405 for maybe an exit, one length of an exit. And I just remember that the wheels were sort of narrow and they're getting into the grooves of the freeway. And I just remember
like the rain grooves. And
I just remember thinking, wow, this is kind of crazy. But so it was 100% freedom. It was, Zach, it was work at the giant grinder until you close at 9 on a Friday and then ride the bike to wherever the party is. Right. And it was everything I thought the car was going to be, which was freedom. Right. Because this was my utility of freedom. And there was joy from a freedom standpoint. And there was joy in that I got to do the loop, and I got to take rides on a Sunday when there was nothing going on. I'm just going to go for a ride. But it was more the freedom aspect of it as opposed to the bike aspect of it, if that makes any sense at all. Meaning I wasn't doing it because I thought, I'm carving up turns and I'm going to drop a knee or anything.
Or that wasn't doing wheelies or whatever.
Ever. Right. And it was just more of, it was a portal to me being able to have some freedom.
Well, so before we, there's so much to kind of like unpack, but I want to try to save most of it if we can. And I want to jump to a question that I don't think you and I have actually ever talked about as friends, Tim. Why'd you stop?
Yeah.
What was that you rode, you said till about age 22, I think.
Yeah.
And so that would have been around the end of college, probably. So you went to UCLA, played soccer at UCLA. I remember you telling me stories about riding around, in South Bay, Los Angeles to like pick up soccer games and you ride over and play soccer and then ride home or whatever. But what was it that
it wasn't just like 1 or 2 years? Like you had like 5 or 6 years under your belt.
Yeah. 6, 7 years. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah.
Guys, I'm like the poster child of what, like if one of our boys came home and said like, Dad, I want to mirror your experience on a motorcycle, there's not a chance in the world that they would be permitted to do that. I mean, the amount of risk that I took and rolling of the dice. I mean, like now I am like Commander Atgat, right? I am all in, but then whatever was the acronym for, I might wear a helmet occasionally. That was me, right? I mean, often days in the summer it was shorts and flip flops and a baseball hat, right? So I took it up to UCLA, which, good God, if you're a college student at UCLA You're living in Spurge, you'll know where this is. You're living in Brentwood, which is close to Westwood, but it's a motorcycle ride away. You're going into Westwood on Friday after you turn 21. You're going into Westwood on your bike. You're drinking beers. You're riding back home. You're going from, I mean, God, guys, I remember one time being on Sunset Boulevard with my roommate and a co-ed, like the three of us on the 250 going down Sunset Boulevard. We did everything you should not do, right? If you want that, I'm the textbook of what you don't do as a young rider.
Interesting.
And
well,
does that make it harder to be a dad at times when you know, when your kids come home?
Oh, I'm a total hypocrite, right? Because if my kid were the boys were to say, I want to get on a bike, I'd be like, no, you can't get on a bike, son. You need to be responsible. I was the most irresponsible human being, and I never really considered the risk. Like I had a helmet. I had like this yellow showy helmet. But it might get worn, it might not. There was no law at the time. But Zach, you asked me why I stopped is the bike had originally been an affordable utility item for me to get from point A to point B that I used at other times. After UCLA, I was fortunate enough to I became a professional soccer player. And the commute to practice was a long way. I was starting to make money. And I thought, I can't ride 40 miles to practice. Right. I can't date really on the bike. I need to.
You can, but it's a very specific type of
person you want to keep around. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I
mean, like after 6 years, the bike probably needed an oil change, and you were like, you know what, it's time to.
The bike was screaming for some kind of attention, and so I decided to get a car, which should have been independent of getting rid of the bike. In hindsight, I should have kept the bike and got a car. Right. But I was living in an apartment. Where would I keep the bike? So it just seemed a natural evolution of my maturing. Is this is the thing I will do now. What's interesting is when I sold the bike, gosh, it was guys, this is horrible. I'm an awful person. I'm going to burn in hell. This thing was so hard to start when it was cold. Like you had to stand on it to get it to kickstart. You had to stand on it. This is horrible. And I get a call that there's a young woman who's interested in the bike, right? She says, how's the bike? And I look, I was really good about taking care of the bike. I cleaned it. I polished it. I did it. I just didn't do anything you actually should do. Like I didn't change the oil. I didn't check the chain. I don't know if it ever got new tires, but I told her this is the greatest bike you'll ever have. It's, I've treated it like my own little princess. It's awesome. And she said, I'm going to come up. Can I take it for a ride? I'm absolutely, you can. When will you arrive? And she says, well, I'm going to arrive at whatever o'clock. And I'm like, oh, I got to make sure this thing is warm, because it was warm. It started really easy. So I said, I got to make sure this thing's warm. So she says, I'm going to arrive at like whatever, 11:30. I had that thing idling from like 11 until 11:25, so that when she showed up, she would think, oh my God, this thing's easy to start. I can't imagine her first morning, like having to stand on that thing, trying to get it to start. So
I like to think that she was a good wrench, and she was like, oh, he just had the pilot jet wrong. He just needs to be fiddle with this, and we'll fiddle with that. And then he's like, oh, it was great.
Dude, it was awful. So
we're going to transition here. The problem is, Tim, we're going to transition into like the bikes you own now and how you got back into it. And people are never going to want to buy a used bike from you. You're going to take, you're going to go trade a bike in, and they'll be like, whoa.
No, but I'm a totally different person now. See, I'm a totally different person now.
That's actually a great segue, because within the context, and there's so much more to talk about in your current motorcycling journey, but in the context of you having this season of your life when you bought the bike because it was all you could afford and get to the sandwich shop, and then you had fun with it. It was cool transportation. But then you aged out of it. You grew up, you got a car, move on with your life.
I believe he said he matured out of it.
I did.
That becomes more important as it gets more immature later in life. Comes back to it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, when you came back to motorcycling recently, a few years ago there, I guess to put it really simply, why did you come back to motorcycling if the reason you had one in the first place was never about going through curves or doing wheelies or hitting jumps, or it was just like to get around, and like you enjoyed it, sure, and you had some fun memories, but it wasn't the point. So why? What was it? What was the tickle that came back to you?
Presumably,
what
you
was
still
it?
had a car, right?
Yes.
Exactly. You're still gainfully employed and you own a car.
You know, so my job, my career is a lot of nights and a lot of weekends. Okay. And then, you know, I was focused on, you know, my car or my career. And then my wife and I got married in 2002. I met her in 2000. So, and then we started having kids in 2004. And so I was really focused on my career. And I when I say I didn't look back at the bike, I didn't look back at the bike. I didn't yearn for the bike. I had moved on to like next chapter,
right. Yeah, sure.
Whatever's up.
Makes sense.
Then I meet my wife. We start having a family and building a family. And now I'm focused on job. And then I was focused on like, I love coaching. Like, and it was really important to me to coach our kids in whatever sports. So whatever spare time I had, it was allocated to coaching, you know, when I wasn't working or with the family. And I never had a hobby. I never throughout, as I was through the 2000s, I never had a hobby. I don't golf.
No,
I cannot
no golf.
You're not a golfer?
Sail boats.
I cannot stand the sport. Like I just do not. I don't have the patience for it.
I just want more people watching basketball, right?
That's all. It's all day, every day. And so I love bowling, but I'm not in a bowling league. I'm not in a poker. I don't do poker night. And I would talk to friends about I don't have a hobby. Like this is kind of crazy. And as my kids got older and I'm obviously getting older, I'm like I got to figure out a hobby. And at some point, Zach, a few years back, I thought, you know, you really enjoyed being on a bike. You should like look at that. Like you really enjoyed that. That was a really fun time.
You kind of intentionally dug up that memory. You're sort of like, yeah, that was fun. I liked that. Now that I think about it,
was it purposeful introspection, Tim? Like you were like, you know what? I need a hobby and I'm going to like reflect on things in my life in my past that brought me that joy.
Spurge started with hobby. Like, okay, you got to figure out you have to do something. Like you can't just go into lawn bowling, right? You can't be that guy. You've got to do something. And I'm sure like, you know, Tim Harris, young 60s, getting into biking, like a therapist would have a field day with this, right? and so I thought, I really enjoyed that. And I'm sure a therapist would say, oh, look at him, like midlife crisis, trying to find his youth from years ago. He's probably going to like still want to wear, you know, flip-flops and shorts. Like, look at him. He's having an identity crisis. That's how I arrived at it, Spurge. I just thought that I enjoyed that. That was the one thing because I knew coaching was coming to an end. I knew my career wouldn't last forever. I can't stand golf. And I thought, I like that. Let me do that.
So then, Tim, you know, I think, you know, so many people have maybe come into motorcycling out of, you know, a necessity in their youth. They're looking for some fun, for some freedom. And you gave us the story about how you got into it the first time. As you approached it this second time, how did your approach differ?
Did you spend more than $500 on your motorcycle?
Do they have newspaper classifieds with motorcyclists still in your neck of the woods?
Good question.
So what I did is I thought, okay, so I had the idea, right? And I thought, okay, and what I'm about to tell you is going to sound as if I thought it through. And you guys know I don't think anything through when it comes to this hobby. And so I thought, well, let me see if this is like, I should try and get on a bike to just see. I may hate it. Like, don't spend any more time thinking about this thing you might want to do that you used to do. If you get back on a bike and you go, oh my God, that was horrible. I hated it. It was boring. It was what have you.
Right.
A boyfriend of a colleague of mine rides. Okay. And he's like a super, super nice guy. And I know him a bit. And I said, look, hey, I know you ride. I'm thinking about getting back into it. Do you think I could ride your bike to just see if I'm,
and what kind of bike was it?
I like this. Well, this is the crazy thing. So I don't remember, this is Tim Harris. He's been frozen in motorcycle ice for 40 years, right? They're just thawing him out in 40-degree heat. It's just taking a while. I knew nothing. Spurs, I do not, like, you think I know nothing now. I knew less then. And I said, I didn't know what he had. Like, I had no idea what he had. Right. I mean, he could have shown up on a trike. I don't know. and so he says, I said, look, is there any way I could just ride your bike? And he's the nicest man in the world. He said, sure. Do you have a license? And I said, well, I used to, but somewhere along the way, the M fell off of the license. It fell off.
That's actually a question I had. It was like, were you still technically legal? It sounds like at some point you lost it and you didn't care because it didn't matter.
At some point it falls off, which was weird. Right, and probably at some point they said it's going to fall off unless you retest. Right. I don't know.
Right.
So he says, yeah, let's meet. And we met in a parking lot and he pulls up. Okay. If I'm sitting there that day, guys, he pulls up on a motorcycle. That's what he pulls up on. He pulls up on a motorcycle. I know now that he pulled up on a Multistrada, a Ducati, right? Okay. At the time, he pulled up on a motorcycle.
Right.
Right. And he pulls up and I look at it and I can see that, it says Ducati. I'm like, okay, now I don't know what model of Ducati it is. And so he sort of gives me a primer on this is how it works and I knew how to ride a motorcycle. Right. And like, here's how you turn it on. Here's the this, here's the that.
You're like, where's the Kickstarter? Right. Hopefully you pre-warmed it up for me.
It was a big, it's a big Multistrada. It's got the bags. It's got the the luggage. It's got everything. And he loans me his helmet. And I thought, okay, God, don't drop it. Whatever you do, just don't drop this thing. This is, he likes this. You don't know and I had no idea. Am I going to like pop the clutch all over the place? Am I not going to be able to get started? Is it going to fall?
So just to interrupt you quickly. Yeah. For those of you who don't know Tim as we do, and are not looking at him on video, perhaps only hearing his audio, Tim, you are 6'4", 6'3", 6'4"?
No, I'm not as big as Spurgeon. I'm 6'2". I'm shrinking. I'm shrinking by the day, which makes me, I don't know, a Gen something old. I'm shrinking by the day. But I used to be 6'3". I'm 6'2" now.
Okay. Yeah, but see, my 6'3" is all in like the volume of the hair up top.
It's pitching.
Yeah.
So my point is, Tim, you do have an advantage in the situation of being a tallish, strong guy, and a former pro athlete. So your hand-eye coordination is pretty good. But I don't think this is another piece of your motorcycling history that I don't think I've ever talked about with you as a friend. And you're about to get to it. And so I just want to say that I'm super interested to hear you dissect this. What was that like? The first time in 35 years, you pulled in a clutch and you put the bike in gear, click, and you let the clutch out. Like, what was that like?
It was more nerve-wracking than it needed to be. Like, it came back a lot faster and easier than I thought it might.
Okay.
Right. Cool. I knew pulling the clutch, I didn't know what the words friction zone were, to be honest with you. But I knew pulling the clutch, start letting the clutch out, give a little bit of gas, it revs up, throw it into second, revs up, etc. The concern that I had going in did not need to be as high as it was, because it was a lot easier. Gotcha. And no pun intended, it was like getting back on a bike. And it was a lot easier. And so I didn't drop the bike. It's not an old, it's a big bike, right? It's 500 something, whatever. I didn't drop it. It felt manageable. We were over it was like a weekday at an aerospace, farm. So there's a lot of parking lot space. So I did some loops in the parking lot and I felt pretty comfortable. And so I'm like, I'm going to take it out of the street. So I took it out of the street, went around the block, and it felt really comfortable. And what it did, Zach, is it confirmed like, okay, I can do this still. Right. Okay. I'm still okay. I'm able to do this. I'm able to ride. Right. I haven't forgotten. And B, it's pretty fun. Like, it's pretty fun.
So I'm wondering that was my next question. It's like, what did you have a moment either on the bike or when you brought the bike back and you put it in neutral and you put it on the kickstand and you shut it off and you say, Jim Bob, whatever his name was, thanks so much. Really appreciate that. It was really nice of you. And then you get back in your car and you're driving back to the office or your house or something like that. I'm imagining a moment that you had where you said like, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm back. I'm going to do it. And So was that when you were still on the bike, or was it after? Was it the day after? When did that happen?
No, I think it was, Zach, I think when I was on the bike on the street. So I was driving it like an actual human being, like would, like not just, I'm going to go around the parking lot.
Not just in a parking lot.
Yeah. When I was
and
actually
you sure it
on
wasn't
the street,
just breaking the law by riding as an unlicensed?
I was doing everything I shouldn't do, right? So I was on the street and I thought, okay, A, I can do this, and B, this is super fun.
Okay.
This is A, I can do this, and B, I can do this, super fun. And I got back and I said, hey, Jim Bob, I just really appreciate it. It was a blast. And Jim Bob told me, like, if you ever want to borrow the bike, and he's a really gracious guy. If you ever want to borrow the bike, just let me know. You can borrow it for a week. You can, take it out. And as I've learned, people who ride motorcycles are incredibly kind. And he's just like everybody else in motorcycling that I've met. And that's when I said, all right, now I can explore this more. And that's when it got interesting, because I got into sort of what I'm going to buy.
And so obviously when you kicked things off the first time around, you went to the newspaper, you looked up classifieds, you bought a used bike that you saw in the newspaper. Fast forward 35 years down the road. Give us, you don't have to go into crazy detail, but like, what was your path into finding a motorcycle? Like you walked in and you didn't know that it was a multi-strada that Jim Bob brought you, and you're looking at these bikes and they all look different. Like, you leave, you're excited, you don't want to give the keys back, you're feeling that energy. Then how did you translate that energy into jumping into this new world of motorcycling and choosing a bike?
So you have to remember, I've been in ice for 40 years, so I don't have a feel of what's good, what's bad, what you ride, what you do. I knew what I didn't want. I knew by looks, Spurgeon, what I didn't want. Mm-hmm. I knew I didn't want a super naked, I didn't want to, because I'm 150 years old. I didn't want to be bent over, right, where I can't get off the bike. I knew kind of what I did not want, but I wasn't sure what I did want. And like most things in this part of the journey, because I'm not a wrencher, I'm not a machine person, and I've been on ice for 40 years, everything was based on looks. Everything was based on what, I didn't really, I had a 250. 250 was fine for then, but I didn't know what that meant now.
And just, sorry to interrupt, Tim, but just in case people were confused at any point, any of you out there, a Honda XL 250 is like an enduro. It's a
vintage, enduro.
Early dual, it was early 70s or mid 70s. Dual sport, basically. It was a kind of what looks like is a dirt bike you can ride on the street.
Yeah.
And so that was your history. And so did you find yourself gravitating toward that?
Yes. Okay, I liked that look, but I also liked the look of the modern classics. I really liked the Bonneville. I liked that look.
So something that had a bit more timeless.
Like I love World War II movies. I love Steve McQueen. He's jumping the fence. Then he gets caught up in the barbed wire. I love that look of that bike. That's where I started. And then I think I may have gone to like the Triumph website. I'm like, okay, the T100, the T100. That's sort of what I'm looking for. That was the first step in sort of a journey, that led me to the first bike on the return.
And how long did that journey, so for people listening that are like, oh, like I'm Tim Harris 4 or 5 years ago, I'm feeling like maybe I want to try this out. You start going down the spiral. Maybe somebody out there is listening to this podcast that's at that point in their journey. How long did it take you from, riding the Ducati to doing your research and looking at pictures on the internet to walking in a motorcycle dealership and saying, I would like to buy that bike right there? Like, what was your timeline?
Yeah, good question.
Not long at all. I would say I bought the bike, the first bike in July, I think. And I think I started in earnest, I'm going to buy a bike in the spring.
Okay.
So
a few months,
3 months, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I started.
And the first bike was
the first bike is the Triumph 1200 XC Scrambler.
All right.
Triumph Scrambler 1200 XC.
So you ended up being drawn in. You like the Triumph, that sort of like you said, modern classic, that style, the round headlight, vintage look, but modern motorcycle, which I think a lot of people do for good reason. And those are great bikes. And then you ended up with the Scrambler in part because you like it was tall, or because you like the dirt bikey kind of look, or what was the?
So I went to, I'm like, all right, I'm going to go and sit on a Bonneville.
To a dealer, right?
Yeah, I'm going to sit on a Bonneville just because I have no idea, right? So there was a new dealership that had just opened up. Okay. And I said, all right, and it's not too far from my house. I'm going to drive there. I'm going to sit on a T100, T120 and see what I think. And it's interesting, guys. I showed up and they hadn't been home too long. I made sure that I confirmed that they were open, the hours, and I showed up and the doors locked. And there's like a couple guys standing outside, like with, their arms crossed, and they said, like, can we help you? And I said, like, yeah, I wanted to come in. I'm interested in buying a bike. I wanted to come in and sit on one of the Bonnevilles, and the door's locked. They said, oh yeah, we just opened recently. There's a staff meeting. And I said, oh, okay, well, so I can't go in and sit on the bike. And he says, no, because there's a staff meeting. But he says, but I have a T100 parked right over there. You could sit on that. And so I sat on it, and it felt a little low for me. I don't know, compared to whatever. It just felt a little low. Immediately, the guy's trying to, he's trying to window sale me. Like, hey, if you look in the window, there's a Thruxton. You should really buy this Thruxton if you look in the window. And so, and it looked a little bent over for me. And I said, okay, well, but I can't sit on it. He says, no, because we're having the staff meeting. But you can look at it through the window,
guys.
right? So
but that's also
like
super.
sale.
Like, I think that frustrates me because I know that, and we'll get into it not right now. But like, I think it's frustrating where it's like, oh, you should buy the Thruxton. It's like, you don't know me. Like, you didn't ask me any questions about what I'm looking for. Like, why? Like, you're just trying to push the one in the window because like it's been sitting on the floor for 6 months. Like that's annoying. We'll get into that later.
And you know what I did is so I buy the Scrambler, and then I instantly start Dr. Frankensteining it. Not me. I have someone Dr. Frankensteining it into a bike that starts looking like the 250, the high mudguard. A more enduro looking. So everything that had brought me in the door thinking I'm going to recreate Steve McQueen goes completely out the window because I want to just recreate the 250.
So so outside of the mods or the recreation of 250, you buy the Scrambler, they pull it out to the parking lot for you. They're like, Mr. Harris, here are your keys. Godspeed, have fun. What the first ride on your own motorcycle in 35 years, just for anyone out there listening, what was that moment like for you?
Well, first they didn't roll it out because I bought it from a dealer that's an hour away, and I had no license. And other than that one little stretch of freeway, I'd never been on the freeway.
Did you buy the bike before you got your license?
Bingo.
I forgot about that.
Right. So I am like, ready.
You're doing it all in real time.
I'm just going to do it. And so they said we can deliver it. So they delivered the bike. So Spurgeon, the first time I got on it after they delivered it with my no license, with my permit, like I'd gone down and I'd taken the written.
Okay.
Or the written.
Yeah.
And I had my permit and I got on it because I was just dying to ride it. And I got on it, and it was the most amazing feeling ever because it was it's July. It's a beautiful evening, and I took it down along the beach. And I'm like, this is
just like you're a kid all over again.
It's just like young Tim had done.
I went right back to where I had gone to look at the waves.
Interesting.
Right. Again, the therapist is all over this. The therapist is like taking notes right now. But it was the greatest feeling ever. To
actually get the little M back on your license, did you do like an MSF course, or did you just get on the state? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So I thought, okay, I could do the easier in terms of TikTok and just go to the DMV and like do the lollipop thing, right? And then by that, no, you've been off it so long, do the smart thing and sign up for a course. So I signed up for an MSF course, in Long Beach, you know where that Spurge's, and obviously you do, Zach, and I used one of their bikes. It was like a BMW 350 tinny thing. And that's how I got the license, is I passed the course that day.
And I think I remember that our communication and friendship was just starting around that point, I think, right? Because didn't you reached out maybe just after you bought the bike or just before you bought? So, I think just after you bought the bike, and then you were sort of like talking to me about like, I have my, like, should I do the course? And I think I told you that that's what I did. You know, like I knew how to ride a motorcycle when I was 16 when I got my license, but I took the course anyway because it seemed like the right thing to do. And so that was I think I remember
Tim,
telling
would you
should
recommend? So Zach gave you that piece of advice for anyone out there listening that might be, you know, later in life, or a returning rider that's maybe thinking to themselves, I don't know, I know what I'm doing. Should I take the course? What would you say to that person listening?
1,000% take the course. 1,000% take the course. And now, I know I have a buddy who took the beginner course. Mm-hmm. Like, I've never been on a motorcycle course, and he loved it. And he ultimately got his license. Okay. He's looking for a bike, but I took the sort of, hey, you know how to ride a motorcycle, and come take this course. And I did that. 1,000% Spurge, I would say take the course, because, and this is a bigger conversation, but everybody who's involved in that course wants you to have your license. They just want to make sure that they're not turning knuckleheads loose on the roads, right? But they want you to succeed. Yeah. They truly, now they're not going to just gift it and just say, hey, anybody who wrote us a check, we're going to pass just because then you're throwing knuckleheads out on the road. Yeah. 1,000%. I would do that over getting the appointment at the DMV and going and taking the lollipop, and then you leave. I would 1,000% endorse that.
So what you're saying is you're definitely not a knucklehead, because even your money couldn't buy their.
I am 1,000% a knucklehead.
No, but you're not though, and I think that's a we're gonna pause for an ad here soon, but I think we could potentially quickly cover the, let me sarcastically say, slightly different outlook that you had on gear this time around. which was, I think you've said, kind of an intimidating thing because there's so many options these days, but like you ultimately, I don't know, I guess maybe to put a finer point on it and drive right to what I'm asking, why not just wear a helmet and flip flop, like buy the cheapest, crappiest helmet you can get and wear the flip flops and the shorts and ride down to the beach like you just did. And like call it good. Like that's what you did before. Mm-hmm. So why not? Yeah. What changed?
I mean, I can speak for me. I can't speak for everybody else, but for me, I'm an entirely different person than I was then. Right. I have, you have sort of a better understanding of mortality. You've got little ones and a wife who would like to see you walk in the door at the end of the day. And that's important to me. Sure. And you know, my journey through gear, there was no notion of gear back then, but there wasn't even, you know, back in the day, there wasn't even a helmet law, you know, and helmet law was like loosely suggested. And now, my journey in gear, you know, and guys, you guys know this, and it's been an education by credit card. And, you know, I started in the way I started with a bike. Like I didn't know what CE rating was because I hadn't met Zach yet. So I didn't know what CE rating was. I just was, everything was based on looks. Yeah. 100%. That's a cool jacket. Oh, those are cool gloves. You know, the helmet I just bought at the dealer. Like, yeah, all right, sure, fine. Yeah, I had a Shoei before. I'll have a Shoei now. Yeah, I remember them. You know, the jeans, you know, I got jeans like, wow, these are bulky and big and awful. And why would anybody ever want to buy these? And, you know, boots, I don't want to buy boots. I just want to wear, you know, sneakers. But my education through it taught me like there's just a better way to do this. And you can ride safely and look okay. You don't have to look like you're headed to the moon. And that was just all part of this journey. And I think you guys talk about it from time to time. So much of this industry is a solo endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
Yet there's there's an entire community out there willing to help you. But for whatever reason, I think sometimes we make it a solo endeavor because of the reaction non-riders give us.
That is a perfect segue, Timothy.
Indeed.
So we're going to come back and we're going to talk about community and the perception of other riders. But we're going to take a break for an ad from our sponsor, Motul. Tim, the oil does need to be changed in your motorcycle. So let's see what advice we can get for this ad for Motul. All right, so we are back with our friend Tim Harris, and we left off talking about community, talking about the fact that you're a little wiser, you're a little bit more. Maybe not risk adverse, but like cautious in your second time around.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that we wanted to talk to you about was just, the perception of the other people in your life. And, you're bringing a motorcycle to the office, you're bringing a motorcycle home, and maybe the perception of risk from other people. And I have a fun little anecdote, that I haven't shared with you yet, but a couple of months ago, I had the pleasure of going to my first professional basketball game, a 76ers home game where the Lakers were in town, thanks to Tim, who was like, you have to go see a basketball game. You've never been to a basketball game, you gotta go. And I was sitting at the start of the game, and there was a young man next to me, and I don't know anything about basketball. I'm just there for the ambiance. And if I'm being honest, I had a little card that got me free beer. But the young man sitting next to me, his name was Scott Brooks. And I come to learn that Scott Brooks is an assistant coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. I didn't know that at the time. And he turns to me, he's like, what are you doing in these seats down here? And I was like, oh, I'm watching the game. My friend, Tim, got me a ticket to the game. And he goes, Tim who? And I said, Tim Harris. He goes, how do you know Tim Harris? And I said, well, through motorcycling. And he goes, what do you mean motorcycling? I said, well, Tim rides a motorcycle and I work in motorcycling, and we've become friends over the last year or so. And he got me a ticket to the game. And he goes, well, what do you do in motorcycling? And I was telling him a little bit about RevZilla, and we come to find out that, young Scott Brooks lives right next to the store, the RevZilla showroom in Costa Mesa.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, have you ever considered motorcycling yourself, Scott? And he goes, hell no. He goes, that's insane. He goes, I have no desire. I'm not going to ride a motorcycle. And I was like, man, we get the RevZilla showroom right there. Your buddy Tim rides a motorcycle. And he goes, no, absolutely. I don't ride motorcycles. And it was really interesting to me that it wasn't even like a curiosity. It was just like absolutely not interested. Don't even talk to me about motorcycles. And, Zach and I were joking, before this episode about like, what kind of rules do you have as a Los Angeles Laker? Or do you have something in your contract where you're not allowed to go jump out of an airplane and go parachuting? Like, are there certain rules associated? And like, what has your, reaction from people been when you come home and you say, I bought a motorcycle? Or you pull into the office and you're like, carrying your motorcycle helmet in hand, and people are, coworkers are watching you get off a bike. Like, give us a little bit of like what you faced. Was it acceptance? Was it rejection? Like, walk us through.
So there's a lot there. And I'm cracking up that you sat with Scotty. He's like a super nice guy. And I actually ran into him one day. I think he must have saw that I was carrying my helmet or something. And he said, like, you ride a motorcycle? I said, yeah, dude. And immediately, like, I don't know if this is just a standard answer that you'd give somebody who's my age, but, oh, do you ride a Harley? Like, he immediately just said, like, oh, do you ride a Harley? Yeah, it was pretty interesting. I think, what's interesting is Jim Bob said to me once,
who's Jim Bob? Oh, is Jim Bob? Is Jim Bob the one that lets you borrow the Ducati?
The multi-strider Jim Bob. Yeah, who's forever Jim Bob. Jim Bob once told me, he said, motorcycling is like golf. You either get it or you don't. And people who ride get it, and people who don't. And I think what you find is what I find. Okay, so what I find is I'm very much like pretty much everybody else who rides a motorcycle. You're really excited about it. You want to talk about it. You want to tell people about your bike. You want to tell people where you went. And people who don't ride are generally sort of politely incredulous. You get a lot of really, right? Because they don't want to smash your hobby.
Yeah.
But they're clearly taken aback, like,
they also don't want to accept it either,
No. And they don't, that again, they're polite by it. And Zach knows this because, there's a number of folks within my work community who they support me and they support who I am and they support what I do, but they're also very worried. They get worried. And, I rode once. I took the bike, one of my bikes to a game. It's a game down at the arena. You're riding down on twilight, you're leaving at night. Right. And that resulted in like a borderline intervention. Like
people coming into your office and
people came into my office. Like, we know you love this thing. We don't necessarily understand this thing, but we know you love it. We support you. We support what you're doing, but please don't ride the games anymore. Like, that makes us really uncomfortable. And it was what it was. It was the nighttime stuff. It was and like, look, to from where I am to get to the arena, it's like freeway. Yeah. And they were, and like it was on the way there, it was twilight, it was traffic-y-ish. So everything's moving slower. So it's much easier. Even though there's more cars, it's moving slower. On the way home, it's a speedway.
Yeah.
Right. It was, like I'm going 80 and I'm standing still. Right.
Yeah.
And that's real. That's real. Yeah. Like, the concern is real that they have. Their worry is real.
And this is, I think, a good thing to keep unpacking and to dig at a little bit, if you're okay with it, Tim, because I think that this emotion that you bring out in your colleagues is, I think, accentuated in your case because you are a leader in your workplace and you've been around a long time, and we don't need to go into much of the details, and I don't even know all the details, but I do know that you are well known in your work community for taking care of the people around you and being generous and inclusive and kind and in general a good boss is the way that I understand it, and from the people that I've interacted with at your organization. And that's what they don't like about this, right? Is they see your influence in your circle of coworkers, colleagues, and to some extent friends and family as being so positive and driving so many people forward and carrying so many people along with you, that the risk they see is not just for you, but for their own emotional safety and for others. Right. And I think that's most people are not, don't hold a job that's quite as highfalutin as yours, if we're being perfectly honest, but many people have coworkers and friends and family who care about them and they have these same feelings. So I'm curious how you deal with that. How do you
navigate it?
Yeah. How do you navigate it? How do you deal with the people that care about you?
I look at it from a number of different angles and lenses, and it's fair. It's completely fair,
right, that
they have concern, and I appreciate their concern, right? You can get Pollyanna about this and say, oh, but you could slip in the shower, you could get hit crossing the street. Oh, you could drown in a 4-foot pool. Right. And so you end up sort of pulling on this thread to where if you play that, you use that rationale, it's like, all right, I'm just going to stay in bed. Right. I'm just never going to get out of bed, which on most days isn't a bad idea. And yet, so you have to, you make these choices, and Zach, they're worried about me, and I appreciate that, but they're also worried about what the loss of me would be to them. Okay. Yes. And I understand that, and that's real. But what I think is somewhat not founded in the right place is it is a dangerous sport. Okay. A dangerous hobby. But I think a lot of, when you're looking at it from the outside, it's seen as far more dangerous than it probably is in actuality.
And so, if nothing else,
for those listening, we're nodding in agreement.
Okay.
The statistics.
Thank you.
Yeah, the statistics are more favorable to hear you tell it than people think they are. Because basically, I mean, maybe to break this down, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is where you're going with it. When people hear about motorcycles or see motorcycles or think about them, it's when they are being ridden by a guy with a machine gun in an action movie, or it's when they see a motorcycle tipped over on the side of the freeway, or it's when they hear some story at a party about my uncle who broke his leg or whatever. It's not the millions and millions of people who use them every day safely and appropriately and whatever. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I rode to the game, I rode home, and I went to bed. Like that's
Correct.
there's not a story there that people hear.
No. And you're right, Spurgeon. And I think, there is this perception that is fueled by the things that they read, see, or hear, because, it's like you don't ever read, to use an analogy with what I do as a living, you don't read the next day that the NBA referee did a really good job.
Right.
Like you only read that the NBA referee did a really bad job, that he made a mistake, that he blew something. So you don't read about all the stories of people who rode to the game, watched the game, rode home, and went to bed. You only read about the ones who were in an accident. And then when you dig deeper into that, generally, not always, but generally, you'll see, there might have been alcohol involved. There might have been speeding involved. What I hear more than anything in Los Angeles is you're not one of those guys who splits. You're not one of those guys who goes down the freeway, in between cars.
Right.
And the reality is yes, I am one of those guys who goes down the freeway in between cars, but I don't go down the freeway in between cars at the speed that the riders are going, that they're referring to.
Yeah.
They're referring to the
that
ones
they remember.
Yes.
Right.
Because when I'm in my car and someone goes flying by me, okay, I remember it.
Yeah.
And I think, oh God, slow down, be safe. Like that's nervous. That makes me nervous.
Right.
That's what they're referring to. Because they don't remember being in their car and a guy going down the road 10 miles an hour faster than they're going.
Right.
They don't remember that. Right. That's the NBA referee doing a good job. They only remember the guy going down the road going 30 miles an hour faster.
Right.
Yeah.
With his t-shirt flapping and holding on with one hand or doing a wheelie or whatever.
Exhaust, fully wide open.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of where the industry gets a bad rap is
right.
And what I'm about to say, I'm going to probably doom myself after I say this, guys, because I'll probably end up being like, all of a sudden I'm a target for every car in Los Angeles, but I have not had a close call. I have not.
Then just
had
find some wood
moment.
and just knock on the wood.
Exactly.
No,
I'm knocking on it for you.
Like every car in LA now is going to be like aiming at me.
No, I've talked about this in the podcast before because, Zach and I have talked about lane splitting in the past. And I think Los Angeles has done such a good job. When I lived in Los Angeles probably, I guess almost 20 years ago now. And when I first moved to Los Angeles, it didn't feel like there was the same level of awareness as when I ride in Los Angeles now. And, there is a very, I feel there is a lot of awareness in Los Angeles that makes it easier to be a motorcycle in Los Angeles, despite all the traffic and despite the headaches, because people are aware of motorcycling because it is more prominent there as a city. I think it's a good and I want to transition risk into community a little bit here as we pivot to the next part of this conversation. But for someone that learned how to ride in a sleepy suburban portion of Los Angeles in the late 70s to someone that came back into motorcycling a couple years ago into what Los Angeles has become.
Right.
And you became
and ultimately riding to downtown LA to LA Live in one of the biggest metropolitan Spurge. Yeah.
What would you like? What was your story about learning, how motorcycling has changed on the street and how did that affect your acceptable risk and, the way that it just kind of all came back around for you? Because you weren't just riding, around the beach town anymore.
Right. And then that's like, it's a super good question, Spurge, because what's happened in the last 40 years is enormous. Right. What's happened on the roads in the last 40 years is gigantic. And the look, the paying attention thing is real.
Yeah.
I mean, the people on their phones is real. I mean, that wasn't 40 years ago. There's just more of everything. Right. and everything's moving faster.
Yeah.
And everybody's on their phone, right? And that's real. Now, the little Timmy of 40 years ago, I had no sense of the danger. Okay. And I wasn't paying as much attention because I had no sense of mortality. Right. So I'm just running around on this little 250. It didn't matter. Fast forward, more things. It's a completely different world. More things to take care of, more people to take care of, more danger, right? More people to be responsible to, and add to it, right? Add to it, people are paying attention less. So what does that mean? Okay. What does that mean? It means certainly for me, I'm very, very, very attentive. Like I don't know how attentive I am on the scale of attentiveness, but I like to think I'm very, very attentive. And that's part of what you have to accept. And I think the commitment that you have to make if you're going to do this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I do want to, we talked about your colleagues and people being kind of like, oh, Tim, we're worried about it. And you seemed like you settled back on the, maybe not a rationale is not really fair, but you settled back on the fact that you feel like you have a better understanding of the pastime and what it takes to be safe than they do. And so you have justified it that way. But I think part of that, a piece of that is the emotional benefit that you feel from it. And the upside, I guess, of riding a motorcycle, which for each of us is a little different, but often part of the same river of emotion, which is, brings us joy, blah, blah, blah. I'm curious how that has affected your family. And because your family, your wife does not ride a motorcycle. She didn't ride a motorcycle when you met her. She doesn't ride a motorcycle now. And your kids don't ride. It's not a family affair. It's a thing that you do. And so I guess I imagine they appreciate the upside, but also they arguably have even firmer ground to stand on when if and when they say, we don't like you doing this, or we worry about you, or whatever. So have those conversations, or even if those conversations literally haven't been different with your family, I assume the conversation inside yourself has been a little different there.
Well, and look, I think, they're sort of like the coworkers where they want to support me and they want to support my wanting to do what I want to do. Yeah. There is 100% concern. It's sort of like, if we don't talk about it, it's not there. This thing that he does, right? That he goes out and does. If we don't talk about it, it's not there. I think my wife we don't talk about getting out on the bike a lot, but she doesn't say like, don't get out on the bike. Okay. She's sort of, she's not anti-bike, but I guess she's kind of agnostic. Like you're a grown man. Mm-hmm. You're a grown man. You're an intelligent guy. And I know you used to ride before, and I'm not she rode on a motorcycle one time, and she was on the back of a dirt bike and somebody popped the clutch and she fell off the back and had road rash like crazy. And so she's had an accident. My oldest son, he's completely disinterested. Like, whatever, Dad. The youngest one will ask questions. Like he'll ask questions like, he was asking me the other day, like about size of the gas tank between back then and now. The middle one, he's it. And Spurs, you and I have talked about the middle one. Yeah. He's it. He wants to do something. He wants to ride a dirt bike. And, he and I have kind of come to an agreement. He seems
excitable. That middle child.
He's in.
Yeah.
He's in. And like, it's funny. You guys have, kids that are behind me. And he said to me once, he said, like, Dad, can we go? And I said, yeah, like I've been talking to Spurge and Zach about maybe we get some dirt bikes and we throw on a trailer, we go ride somewhere. But I said, but you gotta talk to Mom. And he said, I'm 18. I can do what I want. And I'm like, bro, you gotta be that, like, them's fighting words. Like you gotta be careful if you're gonna throw down the I'm 18,
Exactly.
And
somebody's going to talk to Mom, and it's not going to be me, son. So if you want Dad to put some dirt bikes on a trailer, you're going to talk to Mom.
So he's interested. And I think he wants to put his toe in it. We've talked about like how fun it would be to get a couple bikes and do like a BDR and trailer in and do a BDR, trailer in and do some trail riding. He's into it. He's all into it. But like I will say is the concern is there. And Zach, not to talk about you like you're not in the room, but like I was shook up by your crash.
Yeah.
I was shook up by your crash. The people who are close to you were shook up by your crash, right? It makes you pause for a moment and go, wait a minute, right? Now, you know, this is your job.
Yeah.
Right. This isn't my job. Like I can go and, you know, I could pivot from this and go like pick up and do balloon animals.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of motorcycles. Right. And that's safer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to derail the conversation to talk about me too much, but I did have one friend tell me, I have a buddy who's also a motorcyclist. He is into bikes and rides. He's also a pilot. He's a helicopter pilot. He's done aerobatic airplane competition. He's a general aviation pilot. He flies, small airplanes pretty regularly. We often have conversations about the parallels between flying an airplane and riding a motorcycle. And we often talk about the mistakes that you can make. And obviously flying an airplane, pretty easy to make a bad mistake because you're in the sky and you can fall out of the sky and that's bad. And almost all the time that we talk about accidents that happen with general aviation, he always says like, yeah, they just like, it was just such a dumb mistake. Like they just didn't flip that switch. They just didn't check that thing. They just didn't do this. They just didn't do that. And he said, I never make those mistakes. And that like the reason that I haven't fallen out of the sky is I don't make those mistakes. That's part of being a pilot in that scenario is you have to not make those mistakes. And then after my crash, he talked to me and he said, you know, it seems like you don't really know why you crashed and it just sort of happened. And I said, yeah, that's ultimately the upshot here. And he said, yeah, every now and then there's a general aviation accident where it's like a really experienced pilot. The conditions aren't bad.
Yep.
And there's an accident and everyone's sort of like, it shakes you a little bit. And I don't mean to toot my own horn or blow too much smoke, but like when it's not clear why the person who's supposed to be good at it made a mistake, that can rattle you a little bit. I mean, it rattled me. And so I think it makes sense. And it's part of the conversation that you were having earlier about, even if you're not going to justify everything, you have an understanding and appreciation for the risk because it's always there. You can't tell yourself that it's not.
Well, let me ask you this. And I want to make a point in the form of a question because I'm curious. And I haven't, you guys will know when I ask this question, I haven't posed this to you guys before. But as a leaping off point, we all know professional, knowledgeable people, for instance, in the medical field. Right? The medical field, they're the ones who see this stuff. They see, and I know you guys, I'm sure know medical professionals who are doctors, nurses, radiologists, what have you, who see motorcycle accidents, who ride motorcycles. Right. Yeah. And you talk to them and it's like just a normal part of what they do. But yet, as I said, when I say, oh, I'm really into motorcycle riding and they look at you and give you like, really? Do you think that how the three of us, and I'm going to make an assumption here, and if I'm wrong, then I'll raise my hand. Do you think if someone came up to me and said, I am so into skydiving, I would say to them, oh, really? Because I'd say like that, you're absolutely out of your mind to jump out of a, perfectly good airplane. Right.
Well, yeah.
Is that the equivalent, guys? Is it just levels of risk? And if you're in it, you're in it.
It's funny that you mentioned the skydiving thing. I'm currently in a second draft of a Common Tread article that one Lance Oliver gave back to me and was like, Zach knows because it's a common joke in our Common Tread meetings. We're like, I'll tell Lance that I'm going to give him like a 1,200 word article and I'll give him like a 3,800 word magnum opus. And he's like, Spurgeon, stop. I can't publish this. But I was on a article creation bend last weekend. And I talked about at this one trip that I was taking, I came down this dirt road and there was a airfield, and it was primarily an airfield for launching skydivers into the air. And it was outside of Vegas. And in the article I said, like, that's not my flavor of risk. I prefer to be in control. Yeah. Jumping out of a plane, pulling a cord and waiting for that chute to open. I get it.
Right.
I get the search for adrenaline in all different forms. I don't judge that person.
But that's not enough control for you.
That is not my flavor of risk.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually funny you asked that question, Timmy. And I think the short answer is yes. I think that is what it is. That is what we do. The outside perception is that that's what it is, right? Like people look at motorcycling and they think, what? Like how could you ever jump out of that airplane and hope the parachute opens? And to us who ride, we're like, it's not jumping out of a parachute and hoping a parachute opens. It's so much more nuanced than that. But it's interesting that you pose the question that way, because skydiving, I do think that's a good analogy. Skydiving is one of the few things that I feel that way about, because I feel like when I see someone riding a bowl or surfing a 60-foot wave or skiing down a rock face with ice and avalanches and stuff, I don't have a piece of me that thinks, what are you doing? Yeah. I look at it and I think, I'm not going to do that because I'm not that, like Spurge says, it's not my flavor of risk.
Yep.
But I don't have any questions about why they do it. I don't, because I feel like maybe as motorcyclists, we understand that, right? We see someone skiing down this rock face or surfing the 60-foot wave, and we don't go to, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Instead we think, oh, yep, I get it. I'm not interested. I won't, because I'm not gonna, but I don't question why you do that. I get it. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right with that analogy.
Yeah.
And I think it's an important, that's actually a really good way to put it, because I think for me, that gives me perspective. Anytime someone says that to me, they say, you ride motorcycles? Are you serious?
Yeah.
Then I can, in my mind, I can put myself into the skydiving question.
Right.
And I can put myself into their mindset and think, okay, that's how you feel. And this is how we can have a conversation, rather than just being at the end of the road, you know?
Well, and I did skydive once, and I'm going to be on a one-time skydiver podcast, but I did do that once. Completely different feeling. Like it's a spike high. But I think in general, people in the motorcycle community get a bad rap from people outside of the motorcycle community. I think that they're painted unfairly. Yeah, and I'm not saying they're completely painted with the wrong color, but I think they're painted with a much darker color than they need to be.
That's
good.
I
think that ties back in, Tim, to the analogy you made earlier with the referees. There's there's 95% of motorcyclists out on the road. You don't know they're even there, because they're just poddling along in their jacket and their neon yellow helmet, and they're just going about their business, and you don't even see them because you're not thinking about them.
Right.
But when you do see a motorcyclist, it's typically because they're pissing you off and you remember them for it. Right. And I think that's the biggest problem that we have.
Yes. And it's why trucks have that bumper sticker saying 1-800 if I'm a horrible driver.
Right. How's my driving?
Right. You don't have like 1-800, let us know he's driving good. Hey, he's driving the speed limit and he's really making good lane changes. It's referee. We only notice the bad ones.
Right. Yeah.
But there are far better and far more good referees.
So then this is, Tim, you're setting us up with great transition. So
that's how I would do it.
Let's talk about the great referees, right? So we talked about the risk. We talked about the friends and the family that care about you, the coworkers that, that are like, I'm not going to do that, but Godspeed to you, Tim. We talked earlier when you were at the motorcycle dealership about community, right? Yep. And I think one of the things that gets brought up a lot for new riders, whether they're Gen Z new riders or they're, elder Gen Xers on the cusp of being a baby boomer, how do you find a community of motorcyclists if you're just starting out, regardless of how you're just starting out? And I guess, what was your journey in that? And out of all the people that came to you and said, not me, Tim, did you have any people that you started to find gravitated towards you and asked questions about it, or were interested in about it, or, were excited to talk to you about motorcycling?
No, I mean, that's you guys talk about it being kind of a solo endeavor, and it's hard. It's hard. I listened to your podcast once about group rides. Okay.
And we scared you off from that.
I'm not giggling because I'm not sure which direction this is going to go.
No. I'm with you guys on it. Like, I don't know if, I'm sort of as an individual, I'm sort of an introverted extrovert. and so I don't, my job is very social, but yet I'm not out there all the time. Right. And I think that trying to find your community is difficult. There's the perception. It's just a smaller, the school of people who are riding motorcycles is small, and how you find them and how you connect and how you line up with schedules and how you line up with where you're going to go and how you that's like you're threading a little bit of a needle, right? This is the hardest thing, Spurgeon, is what is my community? But yet when you meet people in this industry, they are the kindest, nicest people you'd want to meet. I mean, you two are prime examples. Super kind, super giving, super helpful, great advice.
To you, but not to each other.
Yeah.
But
we don't get along outside.
But Tim, that's a great point, right? So like you like your solo motorcycle rides, but over the past year and a half or so, we've become friends and we're texting each other about motorcycles, and you're sending me pictures of the motorcycle outside of your doctor's office, and you had a buddy that let you borrow an Aprilia, and you like talking about that. And so,
yes,
how, if someone is listening to this and they're thinking, I might want to get a motorcycle, or maybe they're in their first 6 months of the journey, maybe they are a new rider that's tuning in and they're listening to your story today, what would you recommend for them to find, maybe not somebody else to ride with, but like, how does someone come back into motorcycling and find someone to talk to about motorcycles?
I think what you have to do, Spurgeon, is you have to be open. Yeah. I mean, like I'm a firm believer that like the stupid question is the one you leave in your pocket. And I've sort of fashioned a life out of being curious. And I think you have to be okay putting yourself out there a little bit and being curious. Like you guys know, I will ask any question on the planet to learn more about this industry. And I think it's helped me. And if you don't know, what you'll find when you sort of step off that cliff of not knowing is there's a world of people who will help you understand. What I think because it's kind of a solo endeavor in many ways, is I think you can sort of, bifurcate it. And you could say, look, it's okay to ask information and get advice and learn things, but that doesn't necessarily take you down the road where, you've asked questions, you've tried to get advice, you got information, and all of a sudden now it's Saturday morning and you're like in a line of 20 going up Angeles Crest Highway, going, well, how did I end up with a bunch of these guys? Like, how did I do this? This is not what I wanted to do.
Right.
They're separate. Like who you ride with isn't necessarily who you communicate with, right? Yep. The Aprilia guy, he and I text all the time, but we don't ride together.
Yeah.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's an interesting reminder of, well, first of all, I think it's fair to point out that everyone's journey and experience within motorcycling is different. And if you want different things from it, that's totally fair. Maybe some people like only want to go to bike night so that they can park their bike in a line of bikes and then talk about bikes and be with and go on a group ride. Maybe that's what they like. And that's not wrong. Maybe a lot of people just like don't even want to talk to anybody. That's the whole point. That's why they're riding a motorcycle, is to not talk to somebody, is to just go out and be alone and breathe the air and hear the engine and hear the wind and eat a sandwich on the side of the road by themselves and not talk to anybody or look at any screens or whatever. And so either one of those things is totally, I think it's fair to remember is totally fine. But I do think you talked about the school of people in motorcycling being smaller. And I'm reminded of a story from my life where I played soccer with a guy in San Francisco. When I lived in San Francisco, played soccer with a guy, got to be friends. We're hanging out weekends. We're drinking beer after games, that kind of thing. And he eventually told me that motorcycling is not a big part of our relationship. We met playing soccer, but that's it. He eventually told me his brother, I think, died. And I don't remember if his brother died on a motorcycle or not, but the point was his brother was into bikes and his brother had died. And he told me this, and I sort of, was sympathetic and, thanks for sharing that. And then a couple weeks later, he brought it up again. And he said basically like, man, it bums me out to think that if my brother were still around, like you'd want to be friends with him and not me. And I thought, that's such an interesting thing that happened in his head. Just because we were both into motorcycles, we would be friends instead of me being friends with him.
Right.
And my reaction was like, I don't like everyone who rides a motorcycle. Just like, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
It's a world, it's an ecosystem just like any other, right? Like, oh, I'm not necessarily friends with the person because we go to the same gas station or the same coffee shop, or we play the same sport, or we do the same thing. And I think it's such a narrow silo in society. Motorcycling is that people assume that if you like motorcycles, well, you'd love my Uncle Bob. He's got 15 motorcycles he made out of lawnmowers. You probably get along great. And in your head, you're thinking like, that guy sounds like a nut job. I don't hang out with him. So I think that combining those things in my mind is where my head goes. Is like, it's not your journey's different. And also it's not necessarily, just because someone rides a bike doesn't mean you have to be friends with them. And that's something we can all admit, I think.
But I think I think advice for someone who's either new or returning to motorcycling would be, and Spurt, you say this all the time, is ride your own ride, right? And it's okay. Like, Spurt, you're great. You're great about like giving people the grace to ride their own ride. And that's super important, because if you're a new rider or a returning rider and you jump into some guys and you find yourself over your head and you're like, I'm not comfortable here. The worst thing you could do is just keep going.
Yeah.
Because by the end of that, you might say, look, I'm going to fire motorcycling.
Yeah.
I'm firing them because I didn't enjoy that. But on the group ride episode, I think you said, look, if it's not your thing, just get out.
Yeah.
Like, ride your own ride. And I love that. And that's a really important thing for anyone who's going to get into this.
Well, it's interesting because Zach just told the story about like, oh, it's interesting that this friend assumed that you'd want to be friends with his brother. I'm guilty. I'm to maybe a similar extent to you, Tim. Like, I'm very excitable. I like asking questions. I like walking up to people and talking and having conversations. And I am guilty of, like, there are times where if I see somebody with a motorcycle, I'll just walk up and be like, hey, how's it going?
Yep.
I see you have a motorcycle too. And I remember I was coming back from South Dakota and I stopped at like a rest stop or something like that. And there was a gentleman who was riding a KTM 890 rally. And I'm like,
wow,
we're going to have something to talk about, right?
Oh my God.
And so I'm like, I'm
Mother.
wondering if he's coming back from Get On Adventure Fest. He probably is. And we're on the same bike. Like, we're going to want to talk. And so I found him because he was the only other person in the restaurant with a helmet. And I was like, hey, I have a KTM 890 rally too. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, you want to talk about it? And he's like, no. And like, I couldn't get him to engage with me. And I guess
you met the Zach Courts out there who was just like, listen, buddy, just because we both have bikes doesn't mean we're best friends
here.
Okay,
talk,
leave me alone.
I like the point, Tim, and maybe this is the takeaway to kind of like round up the community aspect of it. It is tricky, regardless of your age or your experience, to find other people, but maybe not stop trying. Like,
right.
Don't be afraid to walk up to somebody at a rest stop if you think that their bike looks cool. Or if you're at a dealership, like talk to somebody, and put yourself out there a little bit, but don't expect that everybody's going to want to be your friend like Spurgeon Dunbar. There's a lot of Zach Quartzes in the world that are just like, hey man, if you don't want to talk about soccer and beer, I don't want anything to do with it.
Well, and look, the analogy would be if you're single and you're dating and you go on a couple dates and it's not working, you don't just stop. I mean, you wouldn't be advised to stop and become a monk, right? You like keep trying,
someone else,
keep changing your thing, and that's biking, right?
Yeah,
that's a good way to put it. So, on the topic of group rides, Tim, I have to put a shameless plug in for a company sanctioned event that's happening this summer. The Spurs just brought it up, Get On Adventure Fest in South Dakota. I've been sort of like dabbling with this idea of going because so we never talked about this, but you now own a Honda Africa Twin 1100 as well as the Scrambler XC. Mm-hmm. So both arguably this sort of like, dual sporty, dual purposey, adventure-y, off-roady sort of bikes. And so we're not talking about community and that kind of thing. And you and I have had a couple fun conversations already about like, is that even like you don't mind meeting people. You don't mind talking to people, and you're into bikes, and there'll be a bunch of people there who are into bikes, and you're curious about like, going camping on a bike or going on a road trip on a bike. And like, so maybe that would be a good thing, but you're also pretty apprehensive about it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
And
you seem intimidated by it almost. Is that accurate?
It's the unknown.
Okay.
I've never ridden off road. Okay. That's what, like, I can bucket it. I can always bucket it. It may not make sense, but I could bucket it. Okay. And it's the off-road part. Like nobody wants to look stupid. Nobody wants to look like you don't know what you're doing. Nobody wants to hold people up. It's the off-road part. Now, I don't know, Zach, if you've shared with Spurge, but Spurge, if you know me by now, I'm very much like fire, aim, ready, or even fire. Like I'll fire and then just figure it out.
I was gonna use the word impulsive. Impulsive could be a way to describe you.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So
I made the mistake once of letting Tim know that it was snowing out. And like 8 hours later, I had like 3 boxes of cookies show up to the house. And I'm like, where the hell did all these cookies come from? And Tim's like, I was afraid you didn't have enough food for the snowstorm. And I'm like, we have an inch and a half of snow outside. And I've got like enough cookies to get me through the entire winter. And like, Tim's just impulsive and he's kind. So like now I have a lot of cookies in my house.
Okay. So what I'm about to say, everybody's going to like dust off the keyboards and start going, this guy's the biggest like wuss. And what is he thinking? And how could you ever book him as a guest? So I started reading. I got the pop up about Get on Adventure the Adventure Fest.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm like, okay, that sounds kind of interesting. Like all my friends are there. Wow, I've never ridden off road. I don't even know what our family is doing. I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't know what's going on vacation. But let me just look at the housing. Okay, so I looked at the housing and I'm like, okay. I'm not tent camping because if a snake shows up, I'm just going to like grab my keys and go home because I can't stand snakes. So I'm like, I don't know about the cabin thing. So sight unseen, Spurge, I don't know if you know this. I booked a suite, whatever that is. I don't even know what that is. I booked a suite. I've got a non-refundable suite. So I've got a room for an event I don't even know if I want to go to. And I don't have a bike but I do have a suite. So I've already told Zach.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. So for the audience, let's kind of help explain some of this. So first and foremost, one of my favorite phone calls with Tim was Tim read an article that I wrote a long time ago about taking a motorcycle trip to the Grand Canyon. He's like, oh, I'd like to do this too. Let's talk about the Grand Canyon. And the first question that Tim asked me was, what kind of luxury accommodations do they have at the Grand Canyon? Because I read your article and you camped on the side of the road and I'm sure as hell not doing that. So let's talk about what hotels are available along the way. And then Tim, less than 24 hours later, from an impulse standpoint, sent me like a Google map where he found like different like acceptable hotels to stay at. And he's like, I planned my entire trip at 250-mile chunks to where I could find the hotels. So it does not surprise me that you started with lodging. Secondly, let's back up to nobody wants to look dumb. One of the biggest hurdles that I hear about, whether it is young people coming into motorcycling or older people coming into motorcycling, is the fear of not wanting to look stupid. They don't want to ask the wrong question. They don't want to fall down in front of people. That's what they're afraid of. And what I will tell everybody that will listen is that you will miss out on so many amazing opportunities to grow as a human being, to have fun adventures, if you let that fear stop you. Everybody looks dumb. I have crashed in front of people, and I'm guilty of that fear too. There's times where it's like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't want to go do that. Like, I know that, going to do a track day is really hard for me because like, I'm an intermediate track rider. I want to go, I want to have fun. And then there's somebody in the A group that might come up to you and say, oh, like, you're not using the blah, 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 blah enough. And it's hard. And it's like, I'm the guy from RevZilla. I shouldn't be that guy. And it's hard to mentally overcome that, but I don't want to stop going to track days. Like, and I'm not going to let that stand in my way. And also I want to keep getting better. So what I will say to anyone that will listen is whether it is Get on Adventure Fest or a track day or a school or just getting into motorcycling, the thing that is standing in front of you is, I don't want to look dumb.
Yep.
Just throw it out of your mind and like, just be okay with the fact that everybody has to start somewhere. Everybody makes mistakes. And to that end, Timothy,
Yes, sir.
here's my 60-second pitch for Get On Adventure Fest. If you have ever seen an ad for Get On Adventure Fest, which is a event that RevZilla hosts in conjunction with the Buffalo Chip Campground in South Dakota, it is the middle of July. You can Google Get On Adventure Fest and you will find all the information. We have routes that are everything from just street routes. Every day we put new routes out. It's a 4-day event. When you show up, we give you Rever for free. We give you all the routes for the day and you can choose, I only want to ride street. I want to ride easy off-road. I want to ride intermediate, or I want to ride advanced. And the next day, all new routes. So Tim, if you show up and you're going to put yourself out there and you say, you know what? Getting here was the hurdle I overcame this year.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go ride some street routes and experience what this has to offer for my first year. You will still have a great time. And if you are anyone like Timothy, that is your gateway into it, that's awesome. What I will also say is that there is rider training. So you can show up and you can sign up for a beginner rider course.
Yep.
And you can say, you know what, for all day on Friday or for my first half day there, all I'm doing is getting a basic rider training.
And you've proven that you're open to rider training.
Yes.
Tim, yourself personally. So we applaud that as well.
There's a little grass track on the facility. So after you spend the first couple hours doing your rider training, you can just go out and spin around in the grass track and practice and going in circles.
But you know what, guys? I'm staring at my 2 trainers. Surprise!
I'll ride the grass track with you, Tim.
Surprise!
I'll ride the grass track.
Yeah.
Like, Zach and I get yelled at for riding the grass track too fast. So we've got to.
So can I just say, to put a finer point on this, Tim, and you already know, I told you when you told me that you booked this accommodation, and you're like, I don't even think I'm going. I can't go. I don't know why I did that. And I said, I'm going to spend the next couple months convincing you to go and try. And so this conversation is going to go well beyond this podcast.
Yes, it is.
But can I just say that there's no way someone who didn't ride a motorcycle for multiple decades and then just got on a Ducati Multistrada, pulled in the clutch, dropped it into gear and started riding around without having been on a motorcycle in 30 or 40 years, there's no way that person ends up being scared home by a gravel road in South Dakota.
Fair.
There's no way.
Fair.
You got this.
And just know that for anyone listening, when they get to the point where all those suites are sold out, you're saying, and you know what? There's that MRFer in LA who's going to wuss out and there's going to be an empty room.
Well, we're going to do our best.
I really hope not. And I think that, hopefully for anyone listening, whether it's Get On Adventure Fest or something else, you put yourself out there the way that Tim did, because there's a lot of great opportunities. And if you end up hanging out with us at Get On Adventure Fest, there's a lot of community, right? And the community is, you will meet people just like yourself that are hitting a gravel road for the first time, that are scared. And there's a lot of community there. They're going to help you, whether it's picking up the bike or giving you pointers or getting you down the road. That's one of my favorite thing about motorcycle events like Get On Adventure Fest, is the community is there to embrace you.
That's great.
I think that this is a good place to wind the conversation down, because what I realized in the past 30 seconds of listening to this conversation is that we had you on, Tim, to talk about all that you have done in motorcycling and all that you have achieved, and which is significant in my opinion. You had a previous riding career. You took a break. You came back to motorcycling. We talked about all that, and I think you've like learned so much about types of bikes and types of gear and places to ride and things you can do. And you've like yearned to take a road trip, and you've been like, can I ride to downtown LA at night? Can I even do that? You've made such great strides. What this reminds me of is like a high school graduation. I remember when I graduated from high school, everyone told me congratulations. Everyone said, congratulations. Congratulations. What a day. Congratulations. And I remember thinking, I haven't done anything. All I did was go to school for 15 years. Like I haven't done anything yet. And this feels like the Tim Harris commencement. You have learned so much, you have achieved so much. And I would like to say congratulations and welcome back to the world of motorcycling. But also what I'm most excited about for you is what the future holds and all the places you will go and things you can try, whether it's get on Adventure Fest or the road trip to the Grand Canyon or whatever the heck it is. I just feel like you've learned so much, and yet you're at the beginning of this journey.
It's fair. And it is.
I think it's beautiful.
It's been amazing. It's been amazing. It's the best thing I ever did is coming back.
So Tim, we're gonna play the engine sound guessing game. But before we do that, and I know that you are anticipating that moment.
Yep. Can't wait.
If you could have the final word with our audience for anyone out there that hasn't started the journey, that's thinking about maybe beginning their journey the same way you did, either as a returning rider, that maybe someone they've dabbled younger in life, or someone that's just, a little bit older in life that's always wanted to do it, that's just been afraid. What would you like to leave our audience with?
Wow, it's a lot. And first, I would say, in no particular order, there is a wealth of information out there. Is you don't have to do this alone. There is a ton of bad, but also a ton of really good, sound information that can help you guide yourself in whatever direction you want to go. That's how I met Zach. The second thing is be okay walking, be okay crawling before you walk, before you run, right? You don't have to just jump into something because someone recommended that this is what you need to do. Meet yourself where you are and be honest with yourself about where you are and what it is you want to get out of this, and be okay going your own pace and own your own pace. And if you do that, if you do your homework, if you do some research, and if you go into it with an open mind that says, look, I can jump out at any point in time. And if you go your own pace, right? And at the end of every day that you do this journey, you say, I want to do it again tomorrow. Then try again tomorrow. And then I want to do it again tomorrow. Then try again tomorrow. And all you have to do is commit to today. And if you do that, then I think you have so much freedom and grace to try this thing and have your own opinion of it and have your own thought. And I think if you do it that way, you end up winning. If that makes any sense at all.
This is bigger than motorcycling at this point. This is just good life advice.
I got chills.
I didn't know you were talking about being a monk earlier. I didn't realize
we had
a monk on the podcast.
I need a career mentor, so we'll have a separate conversation about that. Yeah. So that was the perfect wrap up for the main portion of this conversation.
Well said, Tim.
Thank you.
But we are now moving into the Highside, Lowside engine sound guessing game. Now, Tim, I know that you and I had a conversation today that there's a company out there that, you might end up looking at for a sponsorship for, something in your world. So would you like to tell the audience, would you like to introduce the Highside, Lowside engine sound guessing game sponsor for our audience?
It's a Kropovic, right? And
it is.
And
yes.
Can I share the story?
Please, sure. Fire away.
Is the Lakers are on a regular basis. We're out looking for partners with the team, and our international agency came and they said, "Hey, here's sort of who we're working on, and these are some of the companies we're working with, and there's this motorcycle parts company out of Slovenia." And I said, "Oh, what's that company?" And they said, "It's Kropovic." And I said, "You got to be kidding me!" And I said, "Look, I want to be on the first call." Yeah. Right. Not down the road when it gets warm. I want to be on the first call.
I need an exhaust for my Africa Twin. Right. So get me them on the horn.
So I'm super excited. Super excited.
Well, it was funny. So Tim was telling me this story, and I was like, "Well, you're going to be able to go into that meeting and be like, hey, Kropovic, I was on the Highside, Lowside engine sound guessing game, of which you are also a sponsor. So if nothing else, you can take away that the LA Lakers and Highside, Lowside are almost on the same sponsorship level.
And I will tell you this: the thing I would say to the Kropovic executives is figure out a way to make some hats. And what I would say to our show sponsor, Motul, figure out a way to get hats sooner, and I'll shut up.
Well, I would just like to say, if you work for the Miami Heat, OKC Thunder, Denver Nuggets, New York Knicks, Golden State Warriors, eat your heart out, because you're not getting that Kropovic money. They are going straight to Tim Harris is in like Flynn here.
So I think without any further ado, for those of you that are maybe new to the podcast, we are about to play an engine sound. Tim has never played the game. Zach and I do not know what the engine sound is. This engine sound is sponsored by Akrapovich. If you need a new exhaust for your motorcycle, you should consider the high quality products that Akrapovich makes. Please play along at home. Shout it out to the stereo speakers as you're listening. We will have some hints along the way, but as long as there's no additional questions, we're ready to start the engines.
Let's do it, boys. Okay.
It's a motorcycle. Do I win?
So,
Yes,
so it was funny when we were trying to convince Tim to come on and play with us. The only thing he was nervous about with this entire thing was the engine sound guessing game, and rightfully so. It's not an easy game to play.
You know what I tried to do? I tried to be able to, and they wouldn't let me do it. I tried to have the ability to phone a friend because I was going to try to coerce Ari or Lance to be my friend, and then I would have like a motorcycle engine guessing game Sherpa.
Well, usually producer Chase asks either Ari or Lance to help him with the engine sound. So you would have been in the right wheelhouse to ask them as well.
So, Tim, we sometimes talk about end sound guessing game over coffee, and you, I don't know if you'd be willing to do this for the audience, but you have a couple of basic sounds that you know, right? Like you know KLR 650, right? KLR 650. How many cylinders does it have? One. And what sound does it make?
Like it's the sewing machine.
It's a sewing machine, right? And then maybe I won't make you do any more noises if you don't want to.
Thank
but
you.
there's a was sort of like a blender noise for a 4-cylinder. Anyway, so
You lost me, but go ahead.
First question we always ask here is how many cylinders do you hear? And I know you feel nervous about guessing, and that's fair. But do you have a guess here?
There's one, right?
Spurge, what do you got?
I'm hearing 2, but more importantly,
My Wi-Fi is having problems.
Yeah, see, it's the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
What I am hearing, Tim, and I'll give you a little bit of a run through into my brain. I am not listening to the clutch sound so much, or I'm sorry, the engine sound so much in this particular motorcycle.
Right.
I hear a dry clutch. I hear a
Do you hear that rattle? The rattle?
Yes. Yeah, right. When it revs, yes.
That's a dry clutch in this particular case. So there's 2 sounds happening. Zach, do you agree with me or am I wrong?
I agree with you. I hear a dry clutch as well.
So there's 2 sounds.
Too.
There's an engine.
That's what my thought was.
Tim knew. He was challenging
immediately
us.
thought dry clutch.
Yeah.
For those of you not familiar with dry clutches, that should be a little bit of a giveaway. I do think it's 2 cylinders. We could be wrong. We are often wrong here, Tim, but I do think it's 2 cylinders. I'm trying to think.
Yeah. As you think about it, it's not a KLR.
No,
this is
not a KLR.
Yeah.
Although there probably have been KLRs out there with no oil in the engine and therefore a dry clutch
in
that
my
rattle
garage.
like this.
Yeah.
In your garage, maybe. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You desperately need an oil change. I'm trying to think what other things we can dig into here. Are you hear anything else, Tim? You hear anything like I don't know, any other like things that stand out to you, like the tone of
it doesn't sound throaty to me at all.
Okay.
Let
me ask you a question, Tim.
It sounded more tinny than throaty.
So you used to own a motorcycle that you had to kick over before you sold it to an unsuspecting young woman. Did you hear a Kickstarter or did you hear an electric starter?
I didn't even consider it at the start.
Okay.
Don't we get a hint at some?
All right. So here's what we'll do.
Chase getting like coffee at this point.
I'm gonna give us the first hint.
All right.
And then we will listen to the engine sound a second time so that you get a second.
I think that's
listen.
fair. I think that's
okay.
Okay, so for the audience out there that's playing along with us, this is actually like a good kind of like look inside how Zach and I analyze it as we're trying to like explain to Tim how we analyze this game. And the first hint is an Italian 90-degree V twin.
Okay.
An Italian 90-degree V twin.
Was it produced on a lake in a really
you know as much as we do, so we can't.
No, not a lake so much as I think the hint for you would be
that helps.
Yeah,
that helps.
The hint for you,
so it's not a lake,
would be that
that's where I got married, by the way. So
which lake
was married?
Lake Como.
On Lake Como. Oh wow, okay, wow. That's a whole nother podcast, as they say. The hint for you, Tim, would be this: the dry clutch and the 90-degree V twin and the built in Italy suggests that it is made by the same company as the bike that you rode.
It's a Ducati.
Jim Bob's exactly right.
Yep.
So let's listen one more time for the audience. So we're all going to play the engine sound one more time, and then we can come back around, and there is always a second hint.
Oh my God, you guys are like training wheels me here.
Let's go. Let's go again here. All right. So
are we supposed to guess the year?
I mean, there are a couple hints in here for, there are a couple hints in here with the size, and I guess I'll just like cut to the chase, Spurge, if you don't mind. I feel like the engine is largish. And I think that's why Tim might have thought it was a single, because you're hearing this like...
You're not giving official... I just want to be clear to the audience. Zach is giving hints that he is hearing. He is not giving producer Chase's second hint.
No, I'm not. But let's just get into that. Let's just do second hint right now. And because sometimes the second hint is...
So this second hint is aimed at our guest. So, so producer Chase has a note that this second hint is aimed for Tim's knowledge base. So... Okay. The bike that you're hearing is a first generation model of this motorcycle. However, a second gen model of this bike was featured in a 2000 commercial as Lakers legend Kobe Bryant raced it through the streets of Los Angeles to the Staples Center.
Whoa.
So
really?
I'll read that one more time for the audience.
Wow.
The bike that you're hearing is a first gen model.
Okay.
However, a second gen model of this bike was featured in a 2000 commercial as Lakers, the year 2000, as Lakers legend Kobe Bryant and Kobe Bryant and Chase, producer Chase does have quote unquote the raced is in quotes.
Right. Rode it.
Raced it through the streets of Los Angeles to the Staples Center.
See, okay.
We've talked about this, Zach. We've talked about Kobe Bryant in the games.
We did talk about Kobe Bryant in the games, yeah.
Is that, are they allowed, are players allowed to ride motorcycles? Okay.
No, but he was going to ride.
Okay.
Right. It sounds like he was,
we've talked about this,
without tarnishing the reputation of the Black Mamba too much. It sounds like he might've been one of those motorcyclists, at least some evenings, who was blowing by cars at a zillion miles an hour.
Yes.
Motorcyclist, a bad name, based on what his security guard said about keeping up with him. Is that right, Tim?
Yeah, they couldn't keep up.
So, I would just like to say, I want to raise my hand and say, I don't know if there's ever been a trivia question in the history of the world that was more geared towards Zach Kortz than a crossover between sports and motorcycling, because those are like the two things that I cared about for, most of the first half of my life. And I don't know the answer to this question. Do you know the model of the bike that Kobe rode? And I can't picture the commercial.
I remember seeing it. I remember the bike that he would ride.
Okay. But that's not necessarily the Ducati that was in the commercial.
The commercial. The bike he would ride was like a naked sport bike.
Okay.
It wasn't. It was not like a Multistrada. Like big touring bike. It was like a naked sport that he would ride.
Okay, right.
So I am, for the audience listening, I am not a sports fan in the way that Tim Harris and Zachary Quartz are sports fans. But what I do know is that if one Kobe Bryant was using this in a commercial produced in 2000, and that was the second generation of the model, that there was a bike at some point in the 90s. So we are thinking about a Ducati that is from the 90s that has a big V twin in it. That's got a dry clutch.
Yep.
So it's a Monster, a 999, a 998.
Is that like a Panigale?
It's
predecessor.
Predecessor to the Panigale. Yeah. So like the sport bike, the Ducati sport bike of the era, the Panigale's grandfather.
The 999.
Or the 916, which eventually turned into the 996 and 998.
And then the 999, yeah.
And then the 999. So I guess that does I feel like it's the sport bike. When I first heard it, I thought Monster, but I think I think it's not a Monster and it's probably the sport bike. That's what they would use in the commercial. Is that right, Spurge, do you think? That's based on the hint. That's what I'm going with.
I would assume, like, the 999 was later. So this would have been, so if it was a 90s version of it, 916, like you said, 996.
Yeah, and the second generation of that would have been the 996, which could have been around in 2000, theoretically.
Yeah.
I don't remember when. Okay, so let's call it.
I think we're
Should
good.
we make that the guess? Okay.
I mean, Tim's shaking his head yes.
Yeah,
so that's
because I'm just.
All right, so the answer, the sound you are listening to, it is, it's a little bit different, Zachary, Timothy. It is a 1995 Ducati 900 SS.
Interesting. So it isn't air cooled. So it's basically the Monster engine, but in the super sport
package,
quote unquote super sport chassis. Yeah. That's one of your favorite bikes of all time, Spurge.
It is. This is kind of like it was. I don't want to call it a sport touring bike, but it was like, it wasn't the aggressive
gentleman sport.
Yeah, gentleman sport. Thank you. Just like myself, I'm a sporting gentleman. So I would say thank you to Sean. Sean sent us in an audio clip of his 1995 Ducati 900 SS. He has made no mods. It is the original pipes that you're hearing there. And Sean, you just won yourself a t-shirt and you played the engine sound guessing game. You didn't even know it, but you played the engine sound guessing game with one Tim Harris, and you almost stumped him, but he figured it out in the end. He knew.
Okay, I'm gonna say this, and you guys are gonna kick me to the table. I'm just gonna tell you, you're gonna kick me to the table. Am I allowed to send Sean anything?
We can have you. Well, here's what we do, Sean. Send us your information. And you automatically win a Highside, Lowside t-shirt of your choice. So we do need you to send us your size, your t-shirt preference, and where you would like it shipped to. And when you send us that email, let us know if you would like one Tim Harris to send you a bonus prize from the Lakers.
I just think it's only fair that Sean gets something for participating in the lowest rated Highside, Lowside podcast ever. So
I think that this has been a tremendous conversation. I appreciate you sharing your experiences with everyone, Tim. I think it's you have an interesting motorcycling story, and I think you did a good job describing it and talking through some of the things that people might grapple with, struggle with, and dare I say enjoy about either getting into motorcycling or returning to motorcycling. And my pants are thrilled almost all the way off with the fact that we were able to tie this into the Lakers in the end there with a motorcycle that Kobe rode in an Adidas commercial in 2000. That's crazy. Yeah. I didn't see that coming at all.
Didn't see that.
No, Producer Chase always has something up his sleeve.
Always.
Tim, I want to thank you for your time. I know that there's a lot of ways that you could spend 2 hours on a Friday afternoon. And I know that you are nothing short if not busy. And I just want to say, it truly was a pleasure for me, and hopefully for the audience as well, for people that are sitting on the fringe of motorcycling or thinking about dipping their toe in. Hopefully your story, even if it only inspires one person out there to get into it, that's really what we're trying to do. With some of these episodes where we're just talking to, real people in motorcycling.
Indeed.
No, I love it. Spurs. I love your notion of get one person involved. I love that.
Everybody
gets one person.
Yeah. Right.
I love that. We just boil our own bucket of water. We don't have to boil the ocean.
That's right. I love that. All right. Well, we're going to move on to the housekeeping end of this podcast here. Tim, we'll let you go, but thank you for hanging out with us and spending time and sharing your story.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.
Okie dokie, Spurjo. Our buddy Tim Harris, we had some questions, and I think we were even looking into ourselves thinking, is it right to just like have our friend on to the podcast? But like, we think he's pretty good at telling stories, and we think it'll be an interesting podcast. I thought he did great.
It's a great podcast. And I that's super navel-gazing to say out loud, especially to our audience. I hope that anyone listening felt that this was a great podcast.
Well,
and again, what I would say is, even if you are not a returning rider, even if you have been riding for 20 years, my hope is that you understand what we're trying to do with an episode like this.
Yeah. And let me just say, if it wasn't a great podcast, it wasn't Tim's fault. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. It was, you can blame Zach and I.
That's right.
As you always do.
So moving on to the Highside, Lowside comment / review. As a reminder, the way that you get your comment or review featured in this slot of the podcast is to send us an email at highsidelowside@revzilla.com or leave a comment or question as an Apple review in the Apple podcast platform, or leave a question or comment on YouTube or Spotify. This one comes in from Andrew via email. Andrew says, I'm considering getting a motorcycle and starting my journey later than most. I'm in my 50s. Any tips for convincing a reluctant spouse to get on board with her husband starting to ride? Happy wife, happy life, all that. Help a guy out here, or this might just remain a pipe dream. Loves the show. Best wishes, Zach, for speedy and smooth recovery. Thanks so much, Andrew. I feel much better. Thanks so much. We selected this question. This isn't an accident. We selected this because we figured we would talk to Tim about, returning to motorcycling or getting into motorcycling later in your life and talking to family about it. And I think we learned a thing or two, Spurge.
Absolutely. And Andrew, our hope with this was that maybe you and perhaps even your wife might be able to listen to the episode together, get a little bit of perspective from Tim's story. And, I think the takeaways that Tim left for you, as breadcrumbs, Andrew, are, talk to your wife about the correct way in which you would approach it. You would take an MSF course. When we asked him, what would you say to people about, getting an MSF program? Like, there was no hesitation, go through a proper rider course, get the correct and appropriate safety gear, to make sure that you can show your wife that you're doing it responsibly. And have those open conversations with her.
Exactly. The backbone of good relationships, communication. But when it comes to motorcycling, I think it's easy to have an internal, dialogue and think like, oh, okay, well, I'll do this and I'll do that. But if you're not articulating that and you're not saying it out loud, then it might seem, impulsive or not, sort of half baked from your spouse's perspective. So, I think, dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's as far as not just planning to take a safety course or planning to wear the right gear, but saying out loud that you want to do those things. It's like probably a good place to start. Andrew says in the email, tips for convincing a reluctant spouse to get on board with her husband starting to ride, quote unquote, get on board. I'm not sure if you're trying to get your wife to actually ride with you, Andrew, or if you just mean figuratively get on board with the notion of doing this and you doing it. And I think that I would sort of like reference Tim's advice and musings on that, where he sort of said, like, take it a day at a time. And like, you don't have to boil the ocean, right? You can like just boil your own bucket one day at a time. Like try to, for your own journey and for your spouse's sake, take it step by step. And maybe in 5-10 years, you guys will be touring Europe on a motorcycle because she loves it so much. But you can't start there, right? Obviously, it's got to be a walk before you run kind of situation.
And I will leave you with this, Andrew, and then we'll move on. Maybe that first step is like, may I go take the rider safety course, and you come and watch me in the parking lot, and you can see what this is like as I'm going through it. I know that is an option for a lot of safety courses. They have picnic tables and benches outside, and maybe your wife would be willing to come and just, watch you take the rider training course. And that could be that first step that Zach was referring to.
Right. And maybe, not to torture all this advice too much, Spurge, but also don't be shy about how it makes you feel, both for your sake and your spouse's sake. Like if it really is something that you get, you take the course or you get on the bike and you ride around a little bit and it just really just feels so vibrant and important and it calls to you so much, then like that's something you need to say out loud. And I suppose the flip side of that coin is be honest with yourself about it if it doesn't seem like it's worth it, considering the challenges that may lay ahead for you. Anyway, so, I hope it leads to the happier version of your relationship.
Andrew, regardless of whether or not there's a motorcycle in your future, there is a Highside, Lowside t-shirt in your future. And I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but if I know my friend Timothy, he might be willing to send you a little something extra as well. So let us know if you're okay with that. And knowing Tim's good graciousness, you might get a little extra something from him as well. But do send us an email to highsidelowside@RevZilla.com. We need your mailing address. We need your preferred t-shirt size, as well as which of the Highside, Lowside t-shirts you would like to adorn as you're going down your own journey into potentially becoming a motorcyclist.
I think, Spurge, anytime someone says, how do I get into motorcycling? My first piece of advice is buy a t-shirt first.
Absolutely.
Start with a Highside, Lowside t-shirt, preferably, but any motorcycling t-shirt. That's how you take the plunge initially. That's an important step. So
but I like Andrew, Andrew, joking aside, and audience joking aside, we do get a lot of questions from riders that are listening to the podcast, or from non-riders that are listening to the podcast that are thinking about riding. That was our hope for this episode, is that maybe, it is speaking to some of you out there that are curious and want to hear from someone's perspective like Tim's. So anytime you have a comment or a question, please go ahead and drop it in on YouTube. You can drop it in on Spotify. You can leave us an Apple Podcast review. We do really appreciate you taking the time to leave us a review on Apple Podcast. Or as always, you can send us an email to highsidelowside@RevZilla.com.
Indeed. You can also leave a comment on YouTube, leave a comment on Spotify. You could leave us a positive review on Apple Podcasts if you want, but no pressure. Spurjo, with all the little stuff out of the way here, not little stuff, with all the important tail end of our show goings on behind us here, what's your big takeaway, huh? This time around, I think we had a lot of big conversations. Yeah.
The reflection point.
What are you going to go to sleep dreaming about as far as it pertains to Highside, Lowside?
I have a lot of warm fuzzies from this episode. Yeah. And it really is Tim taking the time to talk to us about his story and being open and honest with that. I know that I've said it in a previous episode where, like, if we can all just, make some effort into bringing more people into motorcycling, like that's going to be the way that we can move this sport forward. And we're trying to do our part here at Highside, Lowside because we genuinely love motorcycles. And I think that is probably what I hope everybody is taking away today. But what I will say is that very specifically, one of the things that I heard Tim say in passing, if you remember in the episode earlier, he was like, I don't play golf. Golf is not my hobby, right? Mm-hmm. And you and I knew that. And he said, motorcycling was something I had to get into. Otherwise, I might as well be making balloon animals. And it got me thinking, what if Tim is really into making balloon animals and we never knew that about our buddy?
And we never asked him because we're not good friends.
I'm going to text him.
Was this just a random passing comment in the episode, or are you truly a balloon animal artist that we haven't asked you about? And shame on us. Is it a call for help? Indeed. Shame on us is right. We should be asking him about his balloon animals and asking him more questions about his life and what he cares about. God, that's a great call out, Spur. I didn't know he was afraid of snakes either until today. Maybe he's afraid of snakes and in love with balloons, and we never knew it because we didn't take the time to listen. One of the things that I like about this is that, you and I have obviously had a lot of conversations with Tim and yet we were still able to, maybe throw some questions at him that we hadn't had previously, you specifically. So, for yourself, as you're rounding down this episode, is there anything that you learned about Tim today? Is there anything that you took from this episode that maybe you didn't know previously or that, surprised you? Well, jokes aside about listening or asking questions of your friends, I asked him a couple of things in the first part of the discussion, I think was like about, what was that moment like when you got on a motorcycle for the first time in decades and you pulled in the clutch and you dropped it into gear and then you were riding again, finally, I've never asked him that question. We blew right by that in our friendship. It was like started with a message here and an email there. And then it was like, cool, let's get lunch and talk shop about this, that, and the other thing, whatever, blossomed into this friendship. That's great. He's such a good guy. But like, I never actually, like, how would I not ask that question? How would I not be curious about that?
Yeah.
Or even, you and I have heard the story before about how he got into bikes and how he negotiated with his dad, and his dad taught him about interest and, paying back something that you buy in the bank of dad and all that. But I never asked him why he stopped either,
Yeah.
And I think that was, those are really interesting things to ponder and to get his take on, and maybe realize that that some of the things that might be more obvious about riding motorcycles and being a part of this community and pastime that we are, they might seem obvious if you have a friend that started riding and then you met them later and you're sort of like, well, I don't need to ask them why they started riding. I know why they started riding. The same reason I started riding. Well, maybe it's not,
Yeah.
and maybe the reason that they do things or don't do things are different. And so it was like to formalize our conversation with our friend was actually kind of like a interesting exercise for that reason for me, because we actually dug up some things that I never thought to ask.
I thought it was interesting too, because a lot of people were like, oh, well, I had kids, so I stopped riding a motorcycle. And he was like, no, I just got a car because it was easier to commute 40 miles down the highway and I could afford
exactly.
it.
Yeah.
And he's like, it never crossed my mind that I would just keep both. So I got a car, and then that's what I did. I drove a car at that point,
Okay.
And it was like, that's a great answer. And I never would have, everybody's got their own little path.
Indeed.
Hopefully you enjoyed listening about Mr. Tim Harris's path today. And hopefully whether you are a seasoned rider or a rider that is just starting out, regardless of age, hopefully you took something away from Tim's story. I know that I very much enjoyed wrapping up my Friday afternoon having this conversation.
Great as always, Spurjo. Thanks everybody for sticking around. If you made it this long and you're still awake, you probably deserve a t-shirt too. So send us an email. In the meantime, thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.